The artificial sun was shining through the transparent dome of orbital station Vega 9. Below the dome, the Interstellar Academy was alive with the chatter of students from dozens of worlds. Classes were starting for the day, and the wide hallways were filled with voices, the hum of cleaning drones, and the occasional sound of transport pods rushing past. Maya walked with calm steps toward the science lab. She carried her books close to her chest, her dark braided hair swaying gently with each movement. She had been at the academy for only 3 months, but she already had a reputation for being one of the top students in her year. She spoke politely to everyone, kept out of unnecessary arguments, and always handed in her work on time. Many students liked her for her kindness, but there were also a few who saw her quiet confidence as something they wanted to challenge. Inside the lab, the long tables were covered with tools, wires, and strange glowing containers of alien chemicals. The class was studying the properties of bonding agents from different planets, substances that could be used to repair ships or build habitats in deep space. The teacher, Professor Rylan, was preparing the day's lesson, placing a small case of adhesive samples on the desk. As the students took their seats, Maya found her usual spot near the front of the room. She set her books down, then began arranging her notes. At the back of the room, a boy named Cray leaned toward his friend. Cray was well known for his playful nature, but sometimes his jokes went too far. His eyes flicked toward Maya, and he whispered something to his friend that made them both smirk. The class began as usual. Professor Ryland started explaining the differences between natural and synthetic adhesives. Students gathered around the work tables to examine samples, test their strength, and write down results. Maya was focused on recording the data from her group's experiment when she felt something faint and warm brush the top of her head. She didn't move immediately. Years of martial arts training had taught her to control her reactions and stay aware of her surroundings before acting. She reached up casually, fingers brushing through her braids, and felt it, a sticky, thick gel clinging to her hair. For a split second, her mind raced. She knew this was not part of the experiment. She also knew she had not leaned near any glue containers. Someone had placed it there on purpose. Maya slowly pulled her hand away, feeling the texture between her fingers. The gel was smooth but quickly growing firmer as it reacted to the air. She did not gasp or shout. Instead, she lowered her hand and looked toward the adhesive samples on the teacher's desk. One of the small vials was missing. It was the same vial Professor Rylan had explained was a special prototype from the research wing, strong enough to bond to nano-metal panels, used in space hulls. Across the table, she caught sight of Cray watching her, pretending to focus on his work, but clearly waiting for her reaction. His friend was doing the same. Maya understood immediately. This was a prank meant to embarrass her in front of the class, but to her it was more than just an attempt at humor. The substance in her hair was not harmless. If it hardened fully, it could damage her braids and possibly cause discomfort for days. Professor Rylan moved to another table, giving instructions to another group. Maya knew that calling for help now might stop the prank, but it would also make her appear flustered. That was not her way. Her martial arts mentor had once told her that the first step in any confrontation was to observe, not to react emotionally. So, she quietly excused herself from the group, saying she needed to check something in her bag. She walked to the back of the room, passing by the cleaning station. With careful movements, she used a small tool to scrape a bit of the adhesive onto a data strip for later analysis. She wanted to be certain of what it was before speaking to anyone. Maya then slipped out into the hallway, heading toward the washroom. As she walked, she could hear the laughter of a few students drifting from the lab, faint but noticeable. She felt no anger. Instead, she felt a steady focus building inside her. She was not the type to rush into confrontation. This would be handled, but it would be handled in her way. Inside the washroom, she used the station's debonding solution to soften the adhesive and work it out of her braids. It took time, and she had to be patient, gently pulling the gel free without damaging her hair. While she worked, she kept thinking about how the prototype adhesive had left the lab bench and ended up in her hair. It could not have happened by accident. That meant someone had taken it from the teacher's desk and used it when no one was watching. When the last trace of the gel was gone, she placed the hair ties back into place and looked into the mirror. Her reflection showed the same calm, steady gaze she always carried, but inside she was making a decision. This prank was not going to be forgotten. Not because it hurt her pride, but because it had crossed into something dangerous. Taking materials from the lab without permission was against Academy rules, and using them on another person was even worse. She thought of the training sessions back home on Earth. Her martial arts teacher always spoke about balance, knowing when to defend, when to attack, and when to simply step aside. This was a moment for defense and planning. If she wanted to deal with this properly, she needed to know exactly who had done it, and she needed proof. Only then would her response carry the weight of truth. By the time she returned to the classroom, the lesson was almost over. She took her seat quietly, making notes as if nothing had happened. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Craig glance at her with confusion. He had expected her to be upset, maybe even to cause a scene, but she gave him nothing to react to. That, in itself, was her first move. The bell rang, and the students began packing their things. Maya left the lab calmly, walking down the bright corridor toward her next class. The station's artificial sun still shone above, but in her mind, shadows were forming. The kind that told her a challenge was ahead, and she was ready for it. The next day at the Interstellar Academy began like any other. The corridors were busy with students moving between classes, voices blending into a steady hum under the glass dome of orbital station Vega 9. Maya walked with her usual steady pace, but inside her mind, she was carefully turning over the events of the previous day. The prank had been small in appearance but large in meaning. It was not only meant to embarrass her, but had also involved the misuse of valuable lab materials. That meant the problem was bigger than one person's poor choice. She arrived at her first class early, choosing a seat near the window where she could see the station's endless star field. The stars reminded her of the calm she needed to keep. Her martial arts training had taught her that true strength came from discipline, not from rushing into action. She would not respond to the prank with anger. Instead, she would move forward, with patience and strategy. At the front of the classroom, Professor Halrick was setting up for a lecture on interplanetary history. While the other students chatted, Maya took out a small data chip from her pocket. It contained the scan she had taken from the adhesive sample the day before. She had run a quick analysis after classes had ended and confirmed her suspicion. The substance matched the prototype adhesive from the research wing, the same one Professor Rylan had warned the class was still under testing. The fact that it had been used in the prank made the situation more serious. The adhesive could bond to metals and fabric so tightly that removing it without the right solution could damage the surface it was on. If she had not known how to handle it, the result could have been much worse. This was not just a childish act. It was reckless. During the lesson, she noticed Cray sitting 2 rows behind her. He was whispering to another student, occasionally glancing in her direction. His expression was light, but Maya saw the way his eyes avoided direct contact with hers. It was the look of someone who expected trouble, but did not know when it would come. She decided not to give him any reaction yet. When classes ended for the day, Maya headed to the Academy's training hall. It was a large, open space with holographic walls that could simulate different environments. Students came here for physical exercise, self-defense training, or sports. Today, Maya planned to use the hall not for sparring, but for focus. She set the environment to a simple open field with a light breeze and began her warm-up. Her movements were slow and precise, every strike and step flowing into the next. Martial arts was more than physical skill for her. It was a way to think clearly. As she practiced, she remembered the words of her mentor back on Earth. A fighter who moves in anger is already defeated. A fighter who moves in calm will see the path clearly. Those words shaped her plan. If she wanted to expose the prank for what it truly was, she needed to prove not just that it happened, but that the adhesive came from the research wing. That meant she would have to learn how it was taken from Professor Ryland's desk without being noticed. She also needed to confirm the exact person who poured it into her hair. Even if she was almost certain it was Cray, she would not move forward without evidence. After training, she made her way to the academy library. It was quiet, with tall shelves filled with data pads and old-fashioned printed books. Maya sat down at a corner table and pulled up the station's student access terminal. She began searching for security feed locations near the science lab. While she could not access the actual footage without permission, the system allowed her to see which cameras covered which areas. She noted the angles and blind spots, focusing on where someone could have taken the adhesive without being recorded directly. It was then that she noticed a pattern. The lab's back supply cabinet was just outside the reach of the main camera in the corner. If someone timed it correctly, while the teacher was focused on another group, they could take something from the desk and move it to the blind spot before slipping it into their bag. That told her where to look when she eventually gained permission to see the recordings. Later that evening, she walked back to her dormitory, the corridor lights glowing softly under the dome's artificial sunset. Her roommate, Lyra, looked up from her desk as Maya entered. Lyra was from a distant water planet and had bright green eyes that always seemed to notice more than she said. "You were quiet today," Lyra remarked. "Is something on your mind?" Maya thought for a moment, then replied carefully, "I am thinking about how people sometimes act without understanding the risks of what they do, and how sometimes it is better to wait before responding." Lyra tilted her head. "You sound like you're planning something." "Not planning," Maya said. "Preparing." That night, as the artificial moonlight lit the dormitory, Maya lay awake, thinking about the steps ahead. She would need a reason to request access to the security feeds. Simply telling the headmaster she had been pranked might lead to an investigation, but it might also alert the prankster too soon. She wanted them unaware until she had proof. The next day, she began quietly asking questions in the lab, not directly about the prank, but about the adhesive samples. She approached Professor Ryland after class and asked about the properties of the prototype adhesive, pretending to be curious about how it worked. The professor explained its special bonding strength and mentioned that the research team had been testing different formulas. When Maya asked how many vials were made, the professor said only 3 existed in the lab at the moment. That was important information. If only 3 existed, and 1 had been used in the prank, it meant the missing vial could be traced. All she had to do was make sure the theft was discovered officially. Her opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, Professor Ryland announced that the research wing had requested all prototype adhesives be returned for testing. The professor opened the storage case, frowned, and began counting. 1 vial was missing. Maya kept her face calm, though inside she knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. The professor called for an inventory check and said he would be reviewing security footage. Students whispered among themselves, wondering who could have taken it. As the class ended, Maya walked out, her steps light but her mind steady. She had not yet acted, but the first piece of the puzzle was falling into place. The prankster might think the incident was over, but for Maya, it was only beginning. The news about the missing adhesive spread quickly through the Interstellar Academy. By the next morning, students in the cafeteria were already talking about it in hushed tones. Some thought it was simply misplaced, while others guessed that someone had taken it to work on a private science project. Maya listened quietly from her seat, taking in every rumor without joining the conversation. She was careful not to reveal that she already knew more than most of them. Professor Ryland had announced the day before that the lab's security footage would be reviewed. This gave Maya hope that the truth would soon come out, but she also knew that the camera angles in the lab left some areas uncovered. If the prankster had been clever, the footage might not show the actual moment the adhesive was taken. That meant she had to be ready with her own evidence to connect the prank to the theft. After breakfast, Maya headed to the science wing. She had a scheduled project meeting with her group, but her real focus was to quietly watch the people who might be involved. Cray was already there when she arrived, leaning against a counter and speaking with two other students. His usual confidence seemed slightly forced, and he kept glancing toward the door as if expecting someone. When his eyes met hers, Maya gave a polite nod and moved past him without stopping. During the project discussion, she noticed how he avoided mentioning the missing adhesive. Other students spoke about it with curiosity, but Cray stayed silent. His attention fixed on his data pad. That silence told Maya more than words could. She had learned during her martial arts training that people often revealed themselves by what they avoided rather than what they said. When the meeting ended, Maya stayed behind, pretending to organize her notes. Once the room was empty, she took out the data strip she had saved from the day of the prank. She compared its chemical scan to the open file on the laboratory console. The match was exact. She now had clear proof that the same adhesive used in the prank was the one missing from the lab. All she needed was a way to connect it directly to the person responsible. That afternoon, Maya visited the Academy's security office. She told the officer on duty that she had been in the lab on the day the adhesive went missing and that she believed she might have seen something unusual. This was not a lie. She did not say what she had felt in her hair that day, but she mentioned that she saw someone near the supply cabinet during the experiment. The officer agreed to let her view the footage to confirm the time and details. The recording showed students moving around the lab, picking up tools, and talking in small groups. When the camera angle shifted, Maya saw exactly what she had expected. Cray was leaning over the supply cabinet, glancing over his shoulder before stepping into the blind spot. A few seconds later, he reappeared with one hand hidden in his pocket and a small grin on his face. The footage was not enough to show him taking the vial directly, but it confirmed he had been in the perfect position to do so. Maya thanked the officer and asked if she could have a still image from the recording. The officer hesitated but agreed, saying it might help if she remembered more details later. Now Maya had two pieces of evidence: the chemical scan from the adhesive and the image of Cray near the supply cabinet. She was close to proving the prank and the theft were connected, but she wanted more. She wanted the truth to be undeniable, leaving no room for excuses or false claims. Over the next 2 days, she began observing Cray more closely. She noticed that he often met with the same two students in the recreation area after classes. They would sit in a corner speaking quietly and laughing. Sometimes Cray would take something out of his bag and show it to them before quickly putting it away. Maya guessed that the missing vial might still be in his possession. To confirm her suspicion, she decided to act. She approached the recreation area one afternoon, carrying her data pad as if she was simply looking for a quiet spot to work. She chose a table near the corner where Cray and his friends were sitting. From her position, she could hear fragments of their conversation. One of the friends said, "You still have it?" Cray replied, "Of course. I am not letting it out of my bag until after the competition. No one is going to know." Maya kept her eyes on her data pad, her face calm. She did not need to hear more. The competition he mentioned was the upcoming Galactic Innovator Award, a science challenge where students presented inventions and experiments. If Cray planned to use the adhesive for that, it meant the prank had been part of a larger scheme to sabotage or distract others while he worked on his own project. Later that evening, Maya reviewed her evidence in her dormitory. She had the chemical scan, the security image, and now an overheard conversation linking Cray to the stolen adhesive. But she wanted to ensure the vial itself was recovered. That would make the case complete. She decided to set a quiet trap. The next day, she approached Lyra, her roommate, and explained her plan. Lyra agreed to help. While Maya engaged Cray in conversation after class, Lyra would watch his bag in the recreation area. If he left it unattended, Lyra would notify a security officer, saying she saw something that might belong to the science lab. The plan unfolded perfectly. Maya approached Cray with a question about their shared history class, keeping him talking for several minutes. Meanwhile, Lyra slipped away and alerted a security officer. When Cray returned to his seat, the officer was waiting. They asked to inspect his bag. Inside, they found the missing vial of adhesive wrapped in a piece of cloth. The discovery caused a stir across the academy. Students whispered in the halls, surprised that Cray had been caught. Maya said nothing about her role in the investigation. She simply went about her day, her calm expression hiding the satisfaction she felt. The headmaster called a meeting with Professor Rylan and the security team to decide the next steps. Maya knew she would soon be asked to give her account, and when that happened, she would present every piece of evidence she had gathered. The prank had been meant to make her feel powerless, but instead, it had given her the chance to prove her strength in a way that words or quick action never could. The day after the missing adhesive was found in Cray's bag, the Interstellar Academy buzzed with quiet gossip. Students passed one another in the corridors, sharing glances and whispers. Some looked at Cray with surprise, others with disappointment. The security team had taken the vial away for safekeeping, but the investigation was not yet complete. The headmaster had called for a formal hearing to review all the evidence. Maya kept her usual calm expression. She moved from class to class as if nothing had changed, but inside, she knew this was her moment to bring everything together. She had already proved Cray had the stolen adhesive, but she still wanted the prank itself to be exposed. Without that connection, the hearing might treat the theft and the prank as separate matters. Her goal was to show that the prank was part of the same plan. That afternoon, Maya went to the academy's training hall. She watched students practicing combat drills, zero-gravity maneuvers, and defensive stances. This place was familiar to her, a place where she could think clearly. As she walked past the sparring mats, she noticed the upcoming schedule on the wall display. In 2 days, there was an open slot for public sparring matches. Students could challenge one another for practice or skill demonstration, and these matches were often watched by a crowd. An idea formed in her mind. If she challenged Cray to a friendly match, he might be tempted to talk during the fight, either out of pride or to provoke her. People often revealed more than they intended when their attention was divided, and if she set up recording devices around the arena, she could capture any slip he made about the prank. That evening, she sent a formal match request through the academy's system. Cray accepted within minutes, clearly eager to prove himself in front of an audience. The next morning, word had already spread through the academy that Maya had challenged him. Some students were surprised, others excited. Many knew Maya was quiet and serious, but few had seen her fight. Maya spent the next day preparing. She visited the storage room in the training hall and borrowed several small motion sensor recorders. She placed them carefully around the edges of the arena, hidden behind the decorative panels. The devices were small enough to go unnoticed, but they could capture sound and movement with perfect clarity. Lyra noticed her careful planning and asked, "Do you really think he will talk during the match?" Maya answered, "Pride makes people careless. If he wants to win in front of the others, he might remind himself of what he has done to me before. That is when I will get the proof." When the day of the match arrived, the training hall was full. Students filled the seats around the arena, their voices mixing into a wave of excitement. The holographic walls shimmered, ready to simulate any environment. Maya selected a simple setting, a clear floor with balanced lighting. She wanted no distractions for herself or her opponent. Cray entered the arena with a confident smile. He wore the Academy's standard sparring uniform, and carried himself with the easy swagger of someone who believed he was already the winner. "Ready to lose in front of the whole Academy?" he asked with a smirk. Maya gave a polite nod, her voice calm. "I am ready to see what you can do." The referee, a senior student, gave the signal to begin. Cray moved forward quickly, trying to push her back with a series of fast strikes. Maya stepped aside, blocking and redirecting his movements without rushing. She was not here to overpower him in the first moments. She was here to give him time to speak. As the match went on, Cray's frustration grew. He tried more aggressive moves, but each one was countered with quiet precision. The crowd began to murmur. Many had expected Maya to be an easy opponent, but now they saw her skill. "You think you are clever," Cray said between attacks. "Like you caught me with that adhesive thing. You still cannot prove everything." Maya blocked his strike and answered, "You seem very sure I cannot." "That little trick with your hair was just to make you angry," Cray continued, stepping in with another attack. "I did not think you would even notice where it came from." Maya felt a small spark of satisfaction. The words were not a full confession yet, but they were close. She kept the match going, forcing him to work harder. The more he spoke, the more likely he would say exactly what she needed. "You should thank me," he said after another exchange. "If I had not done that, you would not be standing here now showing off." The referee called for the final round. Cray charged forward, trying to finish with a dramatic move. Maya sidestepped, swept his leg, and brought him down in one controlled motion. She did not hurt him, but the pin was firm. The crowd erupted into cheers and shouts. Maya released him and stepped back as the referee declared her the winner. Cray stood up quickly, brushing off his uniform, but the pride in his expression had faded. He gave her a stiff nod before leaving the arena. Once the match was over and the crowd began to leave, Maya quietly collected the recording devices she had hidden. She reviewed the audio, and her plan had worked. Cray's words during the match clearly connected him to the prank. He had admitted to the little trick with her hair and to taking the adhesive from the lab. That evening, she delivered the recordings to the headmaster's office along with the other evidence she had gathered. The headmaster listened carefully, then nodded with approval. "You have shown remarkable patience and intelligence, Maya. We will handle the rest from here." Maya left the office with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The trap had been set, and it had worked exactly as she had planned. She had not needed anger or open confrontation to win. She had used observation, patience, and skill to bring the truth into the light. The next step would be the formal hearing, and this time there would be no doubt about what had happened. The day after the match, the entire academy seemed to be talking about Maya and Cray. In the corridors, in the cafeteria, and even in the library, students were replaying the details. Some admired Maya's calm skill in the arena, while others were surprised at how easily she had turned the fight in her favor. Few knew that the match had been part of a much bigger plan. Maya walked through the halls quietly, carrying her books as always. She did not stop to join the conversations. Her focus was on the next step. The evidence she had gathered from the arena was now in the headmaster's hands, along with the earlier chemical scan and the security image from the lab. She had done her part. Now the academy's leadership would decide the consequences. That morning, she was called to the headmaster's office. The circular room was lined with tall shelves of books and glowing data pads. Through the large window, the stars outside seemed close enough to touch. The headmaster, a tall man with silver hair and steady eyes, gestured for her to sit. Professor Rylan and a member of the security team were also present. "Maya," the headmaster began, "we have reviewed all of the evidence you provided. We listened to the recordings from the arena and compared them to the lab's security footage. Your observations were correct. Cray did take the prototype adhesive and he used it in a harmful prank." Professor Rylan added, "It was fortunate you knew how to remove it safely. If not, The damage could have been serious. Maya nodded. I only wanted the truth to be clear. The headmaster smiled slightly. You succeeded. The council has decided that Cray will be removed from the upcoming Galactic Innovator Award competition. In addition, he will serve extra duty in the research wing under supervision. His actions will be recorded in his file. The security officer spoke next. We are also adding new safeguards in the science labs to prevent materials from being taken without permission. Your report has already helped us improve our system. Maya listened respectfully, feeling a quiet sense of completion. She had not acted to punish Cray out of spite. She had acted because the prank had crossed a line and the theft had put Academy property at risk. Now the situation had been handled in a way that improved the Academy for everyone. When she left the headmaster's office, Lyra was waiting in the corridor. Well, Lyra asked. It is finished, Maya replied. The council made their decision. Lyra smiled. I knew they would see the truth. You played it perfectly. Over the next few days, the atmosphere around the Academy began to settle. The gossip slowly faded as new events took its place. The Galactic Innovator Award competition moved forward without Cray's team. Some students avoided talking to him, while others offered him quiet words of encouragement, hoping he would learn from his mistake. Maya returned to her normal routine, attending classes, training in the hall, and working on her own small projects. Yet, she noticed a change in how people looked at her. Students who had barely spoken to her before now greeted her with respect. Some asked her for advice on dealing with difficult situations. Even teachers seemed to regard her with new appreciation for her patience and discipline. One afternoon, as she practiced in the training hall, Professor Ryland stopped by to watch. You remind me of the way experienced explorers prepare for unknown worlds, he said. They do not rush. They study, observe, and act when the moment is right. That is why they succeed. Maya bowed her head slightly. It is the way I was taught. The professor smiled. Then you were taught well. Despite the resolution, Maya knew the experience had left a lasting impression on her. She had always believed in acting with patience, but now she had lived through a test of that belief. The prank could have made her react quickly and emotionally, but instead she had taken the longer path and achieved a result that no one could deny. A week later, the day of the Galactic Innovator Award competition arrived. The large assembly hall was filled with booths and displays from student teams across the Academy. Models of spacecraft engines, holographic maps of distant systems, and prototypes of new tools filled the space with color and movement. Maya walked through the exhibits, studying the work of her fellow students. Many greeted her warmly. Some even admitted they had been inspired by how she handled the recent incident. One student from the engineering program said, You showed us that solving a problem does not always mean fighting it directly. Sometimes it means stepping back and letting the truth come out. Hearing that made Maya think about the wider meaning of what had happened. The Academy was training future explorers, scientists, and diplomats. In all those roles, people would face challenges that tested their patience and judgment. If her actions had encouraged even a few students to think differently, then the effort had been worthwhile. During the competition's award ceremony, the headmaster spoke to the crowd. He praised the students for their creativity and determination, but he also spoke about the importance of integrity. Without naming anyone, he referred to the recent incident in the lab and the lessons learned from it. Our strength as an academy, he said, comes not only from what we create, but from how we treat one another. The future will always test our character as much as our skill. Maya listened quietly, understanding that his words were meant for everyone, not just those involved in the incident. When the ceremony ended, she returned to her dormitory with a calm mind. The matter with Cray was behind her, and the academy had grown stronger because of it. That night, as she looked out the dormitory window at the stars, She thought about the path ahead. There would be other challenges in the future, perhaps greater than this one. But she knew she had the discipline to face them. She had proven that to herself as much as to anyone else. In the distance, a transport ship moved across the dark sky, its lights glimmering against the endless black. It reminded her of the journeys still to come, the places she might go and the people she might meet. Whatever lay ahead, she would meet it with the same steady focus she had carried through this test. And that thought filled her with a quiet strength that no one could take away. The days after the Galactic Innovator Award ceremony passed quietly at the Interstellar Academy. The corridors were filled with students preparing for final assignments before the midterm break. The incident with Cray was no longer the main subject of conversation, but it had left its mark. New lab security measures had been installed, and the staff were more alert than ever. Maya continued with her usual schedule. She attended her classes, trained in the hall, and spent evenings reading in the library or working on her own small research projects. Yet she knew the story was not entirely over. There was still the matter of sharing the full truth with those who had only heard parts of it. The headmaster had handled the official consequences, but many students still did not understand how everything had unfolded. Some believed Cray had simply been caught with the adhesive. Others thought it had been an accident. Only a few knew that the prank in the lab had been the starting point. One afternoon, Professor Rylan approached Maya in the corridor. "The council has asked me to speak to the first-year students about lab safety and integrity," he said. "I believe your experience could make the lesson more real for them. Would you be willing to share what happened?" Maya considered the request. Speaking about the incident publicly was not something she had planned, but if it could help others understand the importance of patience and observation, it might be worth it. "Yes," she replied. "I will tell them." 2 days later, the first-year students gathered in one of the Academy's lecture halls. The room was bright, with large windows showing the view of the station's outer ring and the stars beyond. Maya sat at the front with Professor Rylan, waiting for the session to begin. When it was her turn to speak, she rose and faced the group. "I want to tell you a story," she began. "It happened here in this academy, in the science lab. A student played a prank on me by putting adhesive in my hair. At first, I did not react. I removed it quietly, but I kept a small sample. I had a feeling it was not ordinary glue." She explained how she had analyzed the sample and found it matched the prototype adhesive from the research wing. She described watching the security footage, finding the image of Cray near the supply cabinet, and overhearing his conversation in the recreation area. She told them about the sparring match and how she had used it to gather a confession. The students listened closely, some leaning forward in their seats. Maya's voice was steady, not dramatic. She spoke about the importance of keeping calm, of waiting for the right moment to act, and of making sure every step was supported by facts. "In martial arts," she said, "we are taught not to fight out of anger. The same is true in solving problems. If I had reacted in the moment, I might have said things without proof. Instead, I took time to understand what really happened. That is why the truth was clear when I finally spoke." When she finished, there was a short silence, followed by respectful applause. Professor Rylan thanked her and turned to the students. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "Your skills and knowledge are important, but your character will decide how you use them. Learn from Maya's example." After the session, several students approached Maya to thank her. One said, "I never thought about how staying calm could make such a difference. I will remember that." Another added, "You could have embarrassed him in front of everyone right away, but you didn't. That is real strength." The experience left Maya thoughtful. She had not told the story for praise. She had told it because she wanted others to see that there was another way to face challenges, one that did not rely on quick anger or revenge. Later that evening, as she sat in the library, Lyra joined her at the table. "I heard about your talk," Lyra said. "You really made them think." Maya smiled slightly. "If it helps even one of them avoid a mistake, then it was worth it." As the midterm break approached, the academy grew quieter. Some students left the station to visit their homeworlds, while others stayed behind to work on projects. Maya chose to stay. She enjoyed the calm atmosphere and the extra time for training and study. One evening, while practicing in the training hall, she noticed Cray enter. He stood near the door for a moment, watching her. She did not stop her movements, but she kept him in the corner of her vision. After a few moments, he walked over. "I wanted to say something," Cray began. His voice was quieter than usual. "I know what I did was wrong. I was trying to get ahead in the competition, and I thought making you look bad would help me. It didn't. You didn't have to go through all that trouble to expose me, but you did, and I understand why." Maya paused her practice and faced him. "I did it because it was not just about me. The adhesive was valuable. If someone had been hurt or something damaged, it would have been worse. You can still choose to do better from now on." Cray nodded. "I will. I have to make up for it somehow." He left without saying more, and Maya returned to her training. She did not know if his change of attitude would last, but his words were a small sign that the lesson might have reached him too. That night. She looked out the dormitory window at the lights of distant ships moving through the dark. The academy had taught her many things already, but this experience had been one of the most valuable. It had shown her that strength was not only in the body, but also in the mind and the choices one made. There was still one final stage to this chapter: the formal closing of the investigation by the Academy Council. Once that was done, the matter would be fully behind her, and she knew she would be ready for whatever came next. The final council meeting regarding the incident with Cray was scheduled on a crisp morning at the Interstellar Academy. The council chamber was a large circular room with glowing panels that displayed student records and lab logs. Headmaster Terrell, Professor Ryland, the security chief, and several senior faculty members were present. Maya entered calmly, carrying her datapad and notes. She was not nervous. She had prepared, and she knew the truth was clear. "Good morning, Maya," the headmaster said with a nod. "Please present your account of the events for the council." Maya stepped forward and began to speak. She described the prank, the adhesive in her hair, and how she had analyzed the substance. She explained how she observed Cray's movements in the lab, confirmed details with the security footage, and gathered the evidence in the recreation area. She also recounted the arena match and how it had helped confirm his involvement. Her voice was steady, her words clear. She did not speak to shame Cray, but to explain the sequence of events. She highlighted the lessons learned about responsibility, patience, and the importance of observing before reacting. The council members listened attentively, occasionally nodding. When she finished, Headmaster Terrell spoke. "Maya, your actions demonstrate a remarkable level of discipline and intelligence. You have not only protected yourself and academy property, but also set an example for all students. Your approach was precise and measured, showing how strength is often found in patience and careful thought." Professor Ryland added, "We are also implementing additional safeguards in all the laboratories. Maya's careful handling of the situation has helped us improve our security systems. Future students will benefit from her example." The council voted unanimously. Cray would continue his studies at the academy, but with additional supervision and mentorship in the research wing. He would also participate in ethics workshops designed to strengthen understanding of responsibility and teamwork. Maya had made it clear that her goal was not punishment, but guidance, and the council's decision reflected that. After the meeting, Maya walked through the academy corridors. Students paused to greet her, some with curiosity and others with admiration. Many had heard the story from peers, and now they understood the full scope of what had occurred. Some younger students approached her cautiously, asking how she had stayed so calm and how they could apply the same principles in their own studies and activities. "I try to focus on facts and observe before I act," Maya said. "It is not always easy, but it makes a difference. Acting out of anger often leads to mistakes, while patience gives clarity." Over the following weeks, Maya continued her studies and training, but she noticed something subtle changing in the academy. Students were more careful in the labs. They treated each other's property with respect. They listened more and reacted less hastily. Her example had sparked a quiet shift in behavior. Teachers commented on the difference and encouraged discussions about ethics and responsibility in practical work. One afternoon, Maya returned to the training hall for a solo session. The arena where she had faced Cray was empty, the holographic walls glowing softly. She went through her routine, striking and stepping with precision, thinking about how physical and mental discipline were connected. Each movement reminded her that control over oneself was more powerful than control over others. Cray entered quietly. He did not approach immediately. Instead, he watched for a moment before walking over. "Maya," he said softly, "I want to thank you. I have been thinking about what happened. I understand how reckless I was, and I see now why patience and observation are so important. I will work to do better." Maya nodded. Acknowledging mistakes is the first step toward improvement. You can still make the right choices. Over the next few days, Cray began participating more responsibly in class, completing tasks carefully, and helping his peers rather than trying to impress them. Maya noticed the change and felt a quiet satisfaction. It was a small sign that lessons could lead to growth, not just consequences. Outside of the academy, Maya's reputation began to spread slowly. Students from other academies visiting for exchanges had heard the story of her calm handling of a difficult situation. Some even requested guidance or advice on how to handle conflicts without anger. While Maya did not seek recognition, she realized that her actions had created a legacy of integrity and measured strength. The Interstellar Academy also implemented a new program inspired by Maya's example. Workshops on ethics, observation, and strategic problem-solving became part of the curriculum. Students learned that skill alone was not enough. They needed discipline, patience, and the ability to make decisions with a clear mind. Maya's experience had become a model for teaching these principles. One evening, as she looked out over the station's docking bays, watching ships depart and arrive under the glow of distant stars, Maya reflected on what had occurred. The incident with Cray had begun as a prank, small and personal, but it had grown into something much larger. It had tested her patience, her intelligence, and her ability to act with calm strength. She realized that the real victory had not been in exposing the prankster or winning the arena match. The victory was in the way she had handled the situation, in staying composed, observing carefully, and ensuring that the outcome improved the academy and taught valuable lessons to others. Lyra joined her, carrying a data pad with a message from one of the first-year students. The note thanked Maya for her talk in the lecture hall and explained how it had inspired the student to think differently about challenges. Maya smiled. "Even small actions can have effects beyond what we expect," she said. As the stars shifted, outside the dome, casting soft light across the station, Maya felt ready for the challenges ahead. There would always be new obstacles, new students, and new situations that tested patience, skill, and judgment. But she now knew that she could face them with calm confidence. Her legacy at the academy was no longer just about what she could do physically or academically. It was about the example she set, the lesson that true strength came from wisdom, discipline, and the courage to act correctly, even when it was difficult. Maya walked back to her dormitory with a steady stride. She had faced a challenge, turned it into a learning opportunity, and ensured that others could learn from it too. The academy was stronger because of her actions, and the students who had watched and listened would carry those lessons forward. In the quiet of her room, as she prepared for rest, she looked out once more at the stars. Each light was a reminder of the vast universe beyond the station, full of unknown challenges and opportunities. Maya felt ready. No prank, no mistake, and no challenge could shake her calm focus. She had turned a single incident into a lesson that would last long beyond the walls of the academy. And as she closed her eyes, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with the same steady mind and disciplined heart that had carried her through the glue, the prank, and the arena.